And I'm watching for, okay. My name's John Kruger, and I'm the president of the Estes Valley Public Library District's Board of Trustees. This is our September 2nd, 2021 study session, and we will be focused on our 10-year financial planning tonight. We don't have any business to conduct and can't in our study sessions do that other than the discussions that we will hold. Tonight, we're going to turn the meeting over to primarily the Finance Committee to make a presentation on their work on an updated 10-year financial forecast. So, David, I think I will turn it to you to begin with and let you lead it from here.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Is my audio on? I didn't test it earlier. Okay, good.
Yes.
Well, okay. Well, we're here to have the fun with the 10-year, as we're calling now the financial forecast statement. We're here to talk about the year 2030. Think about that, how far that is. Who here may still be here attending these meetings? Claudine, Cindy, you're still going to be here in 2030 attending these meetings. So, we should probably begin with the narrative. Again, we're titling the 10-year financial forecast statement. I'm going to go ahead and go over the first paragraph. The purpose of the library's 10-year financial forecast is to project revenue, expenditures, and investments on a rolling basis for the next 10 years. It helps trustee and staff understand operational funding requirements, capital facility maintenance expenses, and required financial sources, including fundraising and reserves over time. It forecasts the potential future impact of today's financial decision and gives direction to the library director and staff as they administer the library's budget. I think that's a very good synopsis of the purpose of this exercise that we're doing. And I think it's especially important to give the library director and the staff this kind of guidance in the budgetary process each year, which we're now just going into that cycle. So after that, it goes into the revenue expenses kind of and the investment, kind of the current thought on tactics that's being used to produce this statement. I hope everyone may have had a chance to at least glance at that. Were there any questions on this narrative? The Finance Committee just thought it'd be nice to have something in a format that wasn't just all numbers to kind of give an overview of the statement, to kind of to accompany this. So even looking at the bottom of it, in summary, the library's 10-year financial forecast is not a budget, but an aid to building a strong budget built on sound financial information and projections. I think the staff, Cindy, has went a long way in making this a sound financial information. It will be revised annually, and this is subject to revision at any time by the Board of Trustees. So there's no question. You can jump in with questions anytime. This is fairly informal. But I'm going to go ahead and go over the assumptions that were used to produce this statement. Always most important to me is the revenue. This is what I consider the toughest. The decisions on the expenditures will be based on, the actual numbers that we get year to year. But the property tax revenue. Last week, the preliminary evaluation was received for 2022. We just went through an evaluation cycle, and the main key to this number that is usually reasonably accurate to go on for budget planning purposes is it does not include any reduction for Senate Bill 293 as of yet. That has been passed, but it doesn't take effect until the 2023 year cycle. So the number for 2022, I feel, is a quite solid number for the baseline to start with. Cindy used that in her projections as a starting point. Then, per Lamar County, in 2023, Senate Bill 293 does go into effect. And this is where I think you got to understand that you're only going to see a few numbers, but a lot of work went into producing this next number because each taxing district has their own mix of properties. And the effort was made to go out to Larimer County and various other sources to find an exact breakdown of this library district's breakdown of property valuations, and then adjusted for Senate Bill 293, the new percentages. And Senate Bill 293, I believe, only is a 2-year bill and will expire after 2 years. But a lot of work went into not only getting the pertinent information of the breakdown of the taxing district's property structures, and then adjusting the numbers accordingly. So when we get up into the numbers, you'll see the actual valuation in 2022 as given by the county last week. And then in 2023, there is a slight dip because of the Senate Bill 293 effects. But again, with the work that went into creating that number, it's a solid baseline for us to proceed at that point. So I really want to make that point emphasize that I feel this is a good starting point for any projections to have a solid foundation there. So from that point on, I think the Finance Committee was pretty united that we wanted to go in a conservative way at this point. Spreadsheets can always be adjusted. Later on, I'll talk about some playing I did with it. But we're right now presenting it as a very conservative, from that point forward, a steady 1% increase of the property tax revenue. Excuse me. That, obviously to predict a steady straight line increase like that is unrealistic because there will be fluctuations, but we feel that will just kind of give an evening out of those years for this forecast purposes. On all the other types of income, also the Finance Committee decided to be relatively conservative. Specific ownership tax, as Cindy states, are just a guesstimate based on historical data, but I think that was one of the most surprising things to me from a year ago at the beginning of the COVID situation. I just assumed a lot of these numbers would tank, and surprisingly, the specific ownership tax, stayed right up there in 2020. And, reasonably could be predicted to stay at those levels, if not increasing, which I guess you need to hear my friends. As a cynical person, they tell me I'm cynical. I say, well, but, you start out with low expectations, it only gets better. So that's kind of where we're hoping for this kind of forecast. Interest did take the hit last year. While it's significant dollars, it's not a significant percentage of the budget per se, but it's still a concern on where those will go. Donation grants, working with the Friends of the Foundation on those numbers, they're the main part of that number, although there's some other miscellaneous revenue with that too. As you saw, you're presented with two versions. Both incorporate, I believe, and please, Cindy, Claudine, correct me at any point at this time, incorporate the decisions that have been made in recent times about the salary structure, using the salary report, the process that went through to evaluate the levels of salaries and make the effort to get them up into what is considered the appropriate levels of salaries for each level of employee. Both versions incorporate that. The main difference is the rest of the expenses. I think in version 1 is just a 2% increase over that, and then version 2 ups that to a 3% increase across the board. Compensation obviously is the biggest part of the budget. Benefits, again, using more appropriate numbers to increase over time, using the new compensation numbers, using appropriate levels of benefits, and also things like para changes, but can only use what they currently give as the numbers. So it also uses the facility audit to predict the future expenses for maintenance and major capital needs for maintenance. There is a surplus in Cindy states there in the capital reserve fund, so we're doing good there. One thing to point out that's been pointed out before, this this kind of combines what's going to happen in the future. The auditor recommended having a separate budget for the capital expenses. That's really a trivial matter because it's just a single number and it's only comes into effect once in a while when we decide that there is appropriate use of that. But the auditor wants it for presentation. So, but this report kind of combines both budgets into a single report. So those are the main assumptions. I really want to congratulate the work that the staff has done on this. I feel it's one of the most solid forecasts that I more so than I was preparing the last couple of years. Let's put it that way. I just feel we've got a solid foundation. We're really going to want input from the board about, opinions on the tactics used and any suggestions as we move forward. Kay, I will invite you at this point if you have any comments that you want to add.
I think it's, we'll just let people ask questions and go from there.
Okay. If you look across the numbers, what I'm impressed with is the numbers as they follow out will suggest, and again, Cindy help me with this, in version 1 is at 2025 that some reserves needed to be dipped into. Yet if you look over the whole time, I look at things like the total funds at the very bottom, using the very conservative revenue increases that we used and increasing those salaries to appropriate levels and a 2% increase in other expenses. Over the 10 years, it still projects only about a $500,000 dip in overall total funds. And our total funds are at such a good point that that's, it's not a crisis to have dipped into that far using this. Using the 3%, it goes a little further, and I think maybe another 500,000 or so dip in total funds. I look at that as a key factor, the total funds, because we can manipulate all the short-term, long-term, reserves, but it's the total funds that the library possesses is a key number to me. So again, I think it's a very well-prepared report. So at this point, anyone comments, questions?
Lynn.
If I can, I have a thought on the revenue side, and I want your feedback, David and Kay, on whether I'm thinking about this correctly. Looking at the mill levy line, that
Okay.
you said SB 293 is effective in 2023.
Correct.
So if I compare 23, if I think of 22 as a fluke and maybe a bit of a windfall, so compare 23 to 21, it looks like we're still looking at 23 to be 4% up from 21. So that's still, we can think of that as, oh, that's a problem because it's way below 22 and it's SB 293, or we can say 22 is kind of a windfall.
I'm not sure it's so much a windfall as,
yeah.
as it's based on you probably got a property tax bill this year. It was probably higher because of increased valuations, and over time, that's been historically a steady increase in valuations, at least in this type of resort community in the Front Range.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really surprising that it did go. I guess with the pandemic, I'm surprised. It's another one of those things. I'm surprised it held increased so much. I at the beginning a year ago, I was predicting, we need to be careful. Who knows what home prices are going to do? And it's one of the things I'm amazed at.
Mm-hmm.
But historically, they have increased, and that has always increased the property tax revenue line. It's not universal, but it's steadily increased over time historically.
The other thing that I would say that we contemplated is, yes, that property valuation might increase, but we really don't know what's going to happen after the 293.
Mm-hmm.
And as David indicated, we're trying to be very conservative. It could be better, it could be worse. no one talked about why we changed it to a forecast, but the conversation is, well, we do weather forecast. All we have to do is as good as they do. So, but I think that we do believe that the valuations could go up, but what we don't know is what are the regs that are going to be surrounding. And that doesn't mean we can't step out and do something different. We're just trying to be conservative.
Yeah, after 2 years of Senate Bill 293, who knows if a new citizens initiative will be started at that point. So I really think also I look at it as, even with the effects of these plans, being conservative on the specific ownership tax even, and I got to believe interest will recover some. So I that's to me the advantage of being conservative. It will only look better if the world rights itself. Famous last words. Then things will steadily increase, and we'll adjust this 10-year forecast as things merit. We can only go with what we know at this point.
Our historical increases, and they only happen typically every 2 years with the new evaluations from the assessor, have been in the neighborhood of anywhere from 4 to 11% increases every 2 years. So 1% is more than conservative in my mind, but I agree with what's been said as far as we don't know what the legislature will do. Those increases in more recent years were also affected by essentially legislation. It was the Gallagher Act that kept dropping the rate at which taxes were assessed. And yet we still had those kinds of increases in the actual tax revenue. So, I personally would have probably looked at every 2 years at maybe 3%. The 1% per year compounded, as long as we all understand that we are being super conservative on the revenue side. And we do have, as David pointed out, some excellent reserve funds to call upon if anything were to happen from the political side to decrease things more, or even a big recession should hit. Although the last recession really only kept us flat from year to year on tax income for the district. So those are all things that we certainly have to continue to keep in mind. And I appreciate the Finance Committee and staff presenting this in this format. Anyone have any other questions or comments on the income side? Yes, Pete, unmute yourself. Unmute you.
There we go. I had to switch back and forth to two different devices. And I think, David, I may have misunderstood something. Did you say something about dipping into reserves, or were you talking about if we ever had to? And I guess my question is there a plan to do that? If there is, what's it for?
Yeah, the forecast looks to, as early as 2025, maybe having to move funds into, because we have minimums in operating and short term that need to be maintained. And the first level usually would be dipping into short-term funds until it got down to its minimum level. And then you would be looking at long-term funds. It's only the start in 2025. I believe that was the year, Cindy, that it started. It's minimal at that point, but it could increase over time. And that's why I look at the total funds as more of an indicator.
Right.
Because you can rotate them around, but
yeah, version 1, it's 2026. Version 2 with the 3% expenditures, it's actually 2023. But again, if revenue, tax revenue is higher than 1%, then that would still be stretched out further out. But that's what the long-term reserves were established for to begin with,
Exactly.
was to cover those kind of shortfalls, if you will, in income.
Okay.
And even with that 3% increase per year, total funds at this point are, I need to look around the 3 million level, and it would only just dip down. I think it was 1.9 million. You know, significant decrease, but still a solid financial position even at that point. At a worst case, and that's maybe how I'd look at it as a worst case scenario. We're still able to keep up the levels of service, keep up salaries at an appropriate level, and still be financially sound.
Yeah, the other thing we talked about on the long-term reserves, if there were, unexpected maintenance, something just we can't contemplate. Claudine comes up with a great project that requires some investment of, for equipment. Those are other things that we said, those can come out of our long-term.
And usually on something like that, even if it's appropriate, the Friends and Foundation may help on a capital campaign to fund those too. So, even at that point, it may be minimal dipping into funds.
Exactly. So I'd appreciate Sarah's thoughts and comments on the new numbers that have been put in on the revenue side on donations and grants. While all of that is not from the Friends and Foundation, as David said, probably 95% of it is. Any thoughts on those numbers?
I think it looks great. We, the Friends and Foundation right now, we're also in a position where we have reserves. So looking for those capital campaign items to fundraise for. As you all probably know, it's easier to fundraise for an organization when we don't have such a plentiful amount of reserves. So reserves on your side, reserves on our side. We really need to show the need to our donors.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Good point.
But I think what you put, I think it looks great.
Okay. Appreciate that very much, because it is a significant increase next year.
Yes.
Potentially.
Yeah.
And I would say to the entire board, the intent here is to give the Friends and Foundation a target number to fundraise for us. But we actually don't ask for the money until November. And it's the funds that we will have spent in that year or this year that we'll ask for. So we could be asking for less than those numbers at times if we don't have staff, we aren't able to conduct the programs or the capital elements that we forecast or budget for. There's no reason for us to be asking the Friends and Foundation for funds just to put them into our reserves, is basically where I come from.
That's a good way to state it, John. And being able to wait till November to ask for those funds is one of the advantages of the cash flow of this organization. Most of the property tax revenue, Cindy, we would say by mid-year, 90% of it's been received. So we're very early in the year, top heavy of receiving the income for the year. So it allows that situation of waiting to ask the Friends and Foundation till towards the end of the year.
Anyone else have any comments, questions? Quiet group. Okay, how about going to the expense side then, if nothing else on the income side? I appreciate that, I guess with staff's direction, we'll ask Claudine for some comments probably on the 2% versus 3% versions, if you don't mind.
Sure, John.
Sure, yeah.
Sorry, David.
No, I was just agreeing with John to push it towards you to make comments.
Thanks. I want to back up just a touch, John, and say, I think it goes without saying that the board members on the committee were directive and thoughtful in this process that led us to the conservative layout you see. I want to give special attention to Cindy, who actually drafted the narrative and created 2 new spreadsheets. It's a whole new format. So a lot of credit goes to Ray Nieder and then Don Bryson and you, John. There's been a lot of iterations on this, but I want to let you know it's yet another iteration. And I hope it's cleaner and easier to follow. And if it's not, if you're a numbers person, looking at you, Sarah, I'm hoping that the spreadsheets are crystal clear. And if they're not, give us that feedback so we can make it better. And if you're a word person, as I am, and the narrative didn't work for you, we'd love to hear that too, because I think over time with Cindy and her skill set, we can make this so that even the most financially, I don't want to say unfamiliar board member can walk in and participate in this process and feel like, yeah, I understand these assumptions and I understand the consequence of those assumptions. So as a board member, I then can influence the assumptions. So I just wanted to capture that. Cindy, thank you so much. And David, my last editorial here is you're not a cynic, you're a stoic, because it's classier, right? and more philosophical. So just offer you that. So John, I'm going to disappoint you with my answer about the 2% and the 3%. Okay. Right now, where I'm at in the budget process and where we as a staff are is the staff has submitted their requests, right? And if there's 100% of the budget next year to consider, I have 125% that has been submitted to me. So that's great. We want ambitious staff members who are competing for, who's going to do the best with the tax dollars to meet the objectives that you have set as a board. But so I wanted to give you that on an operational basis. I think I know I'll have more information next month about what it'll mean for 2 or 3%. Okay.
Sure.
But I'd like to focus in on, David, you brought up the comp study. And I think it's so significant, and I'm glad we captured it in that narrative that says, obviously, since before I was here up until now, the largest expenses are the people who provide the services. And I'm very pleased. I just want to put into context for everyone. This year, we're filling the gap to 75% point of where people are supposed to be on that comp study, and then in 2022, 100%. The idea being no more games of catch up, no more arduous conversation. We now have a system. Pete Johnson, very directive, very helpful to me in how this operates. I don't want to say automatically, but how you set a system in place and it sets itself. So I want to just make a small point that in this great migration during the pandemic, staffing, Beth, looking at you, the number of people that have moved on or moved out, it's the most unpredictable thing for me to share with the board is our staffing. So just as a reminder, we've made, for everybody we've hired, we've lost in the last year. And our exit interviews, we're going to look at them in aggregate and decide, is it salary? For some people it is. For others, I think it's just new priorities in their lives. We can't compete with that. But that's a very long way, John, of saying, I don't know what the salary impact is going to be over time. And this is not me trying to massage all of you to say, so we're going to need an extra 500,000 next year. First, what I'm trying to say is the past is not predicting the future right now when it comes to compensation. So I promise the more I know, anything I have of actual value, I will be sharing with the board, because I think that will be the biggest impact on, is 2% good? I hope so. I might need 10%. I don't know. Okay.
Certainly. But
Thanks.
I would like everyone to understand, if you didn't look closely at the numbers, the service on expenditure, the service side from 21 to 22 goes up, and I can't read my own little notes, but over 6%. Not 2% in version 1
Right.
and 2. And the support side, excluding the capital facility side, goes up over 11%. So the big chunk there certainly is implementing the compensation study for this next year, and assuming full staffing. which we haven't been
Correct.
at for a year and a half now.
You've always caught me on that, that the assumptions are based on full staffing, and
Sure.
that isn't accurate right now. And just as a reminder, Cindy did capture the infrastructure capital part that is based on, because Kay asked us to more effectively include the facility audit projections. So that just goes back to, and we used to have it in a previous version, Cindy, and please don't do anything right now, but we used to have a tab associated, so it was easier to toggle through and see like, oh, okay, we're projected to do the roof, that's 150,000, or the HVACs, 300,000. So those can have massive impacts on the budget. Some years we have $10,000 of facility maintenance. So just wanted to, Cindy, there's no pressure on that. And just to keep you all on your toes, and perhaps this is too conservative, but historically, just because it's on the facility audit doesn't mean we do it.
Right.
Okay.
In fact, the last 2 years have postponed any of those things.
True. But John, if
we-
I may, it's also because sometimes it may be scheduled because that's a best practice projection, but you know, it's good enough as it is. There's no need to, and we may delay it just because it doesn't need it.
Right.
Thanks. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Or in the case of the elevator, for instance, a couple of years ago, we found out we didn't really need to completely replace it. There were certain repairs and upgrades to the existing one. And so certainly that's one of the areas that's as questionable in a prediction stance as anything. The one thing I would say is we've only made minor progress on the ADA issues.
True.
And I'm very hopeful that with bringing our staff up and having a facilities person really looking after that, that we'll, this next year, we'll really get after that a whole lot better. And I would hope that some of the funding from the Friends and Foundation will help us in that regard, because some of those could be rather expensive. And while we have some funds in our capital reserves, those aren't all that significant, that portion of it. So I think those might be things that Friends and Foundation could get people behind, making sure that we're up to grade on ADA compliance.
John, you tried to lead me to that water, and but you were able to say what you wanted to say about the difference in operations. Is there anything else you wanted highlighted?
No,
Okay.
we'll open it up for more questions from anyone on the expense side
Thank you.
or comments. Beth,
Yeah, thanks for all of that. And I just want to echo everything that's been said about the process and the product. It's awesome to see. And in particular, I'm not a numbers person, so thanks for the narrative. And I know, and John, you said something about the dance that this is, and I know it's predictions, and I think that there is something really in what you're saying, Claudine, about staffing and what that's going to take to get folks. And it may not be something we understand yet. Just thinking about the trends and the way folks are moving on or deciding not to work anymore. There's it's just really interesting time. So I don't have any specific requests, but I do think seeing this budget being as solid as it is gives me a lot of hope that shifts and pivots can be made if they need to be made, because I do think that's one of the most unpredictable things that we're looking at. So that's fantastic. And yeah, I just appreciate everyone's work on it. And that's what's on my mind, because it's my world too. But I do think it's going to change. It's going to change how we get things staffed, and it might be a real challenge. And having some money behind it will help.
thanks, Beth. Appreciate those comments. Anyone else?
I think the solid position also, John, allows 10 years is a long time, and I think Beth hit on the head with the personnel. You're going to have to be flexible, but I think what services are going to be requested to be delivered by the library will evolve too. And to be in a solid financial position will allow more flexibility in allowing adapting the services to the needs of the community too.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, and 10 years is a long time out. The reason we started and initiated a 10-year forecast was the promise to the community in 2013 that we wouldn't come back and ask them for a higher mill levy election, increasing that portion of it. And of course, they've been experiencing, or we have all been experiencing, increased taxing because of the assessment rates anyway. So we've held to that, and this plan basically is just a directional sort of help, I hope, for staff, for Claudine's direction in developing the year-to-year budgets, so that they feel comfortable that the funds are there for the programs that they actually have staff to do. And as David just said, the citizenry want. And with that, I think it's going to be coming up time for us to do another survey of our citizens, of our patrons. Maybe not this coming year, but soon we'll probably want to go back and see what effects the last couple of years have had on the way our patrons want the library to respond to what they want and need. Anyone? Lynn, you have your mute off. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I guess what I wanted to say is this is so useful to be doing, and to be doing on a continuing basis. I mean, I look, and you get out to 8, 9, 10 and know that those numbers are really fuzzy because they're based on so many assumptions, and there's nothing else you can do. But you start to see those years and see that negative net cash flow increasing fairly rapidly. And it's wonderful to have these reserves that give a cushion. But, you know, as we get several years down the line, to see what's coming after that, it is useful. I mean, if you keep burning through the reserves, they eventually go away. And it's wonderful to have them to give us the flexibility and the cushion should some, you know, as Beth and Claudine have said, the staffing expenses are kind of unpredictable and hard to control, and it gives us a lot of ability to respond to that. But knowing that we keep doing this each year helps us anticipate maybe what could be a problem.
True. I would just throw in there, when this plan was initially created by Don Bryson in 2013, starting with the 2014 numbers of tax income, we would have been spending last year, not this year, last year, we would have been pulling money from the long-term reserves. And now we're saying 2026 with a very conservative income level.
Thanks for pointing that out, John.
I guess I've been around long enough and seen these numbers for so many years that being conservative is fine. You know, it's a safe way to look at things. It can be helpful as far as, you know, knowing the potential, if you will, dangers financially out there for the library. But at the same time, if you continue to look at it over the years, we keep pushing that big concern out, which is great. It's great. Doesn't mean something won't happen. Something really, truly big won't happen, either politically or economically. But we've been very fortunate with this kind of planning that was started back then to help us from a year-to-year basis know, okay, we can tell Claudine, move forward. with the kinds of numbers that we're seeing here for next year and the year after with a lot of confidence.
And I think, Lynn, you hit it on the head. It's the opportunity to act rather than react. You know, nothing's a perfect forecast, but at least it gets you thinking in those terms and seeing if you can avoid the future. Like John's just saying, it's been pushed back on when we will start dipping into reserves. So.
Okay, I don't want to prolong the meeting. If others don't have any questions or comments, I appreciate those that have been made very much, and I appreciate the work again that the Finance Committee and staff have done. Very excellent work. And as we look over the next few months, October, November, December, at the budget that will be submitted by staff, hopefully this gives us the basis for our considerations. We will have our normal monthly board meeting on the 20th. I think I calculated that right. September 20th. And the primary business that day, amongst perhaps other things, will be the nomination of a new board member. We're very hopeful anyway that we'll have that. We've had very few applications so far, so there's still probably opportunity, if anyone knows anyone, to have them fill out an application. It could still be considered, I believe. Yeah, Lynn?
The deadline has passed.
The official deadline that we
official-
posted, yes. I don't think that means that we couldn't still, you know, if someone came forward this coming week, we probably could still give some consideration if we needed to. But at least we do have a candidate, an applicant, excuse me. Okay.
John, I want to throw in one last caveat. Just as the Finance Committee, from this side of the numbers, obviously we're happy to be in a solid position. I just never want to lose sight of the pertinent point Sarah brought up of the fundraising aspect. You know, to be in such a solid position, we don't want to make your job harder, Sarah. Yet we, you know, obviously from our side, we're happy with it. But I just appreciate you keeping that on our radar too. Is all I'm saying.
Okay. Well, we have an interesting list of opportunities for fundraising that the brainstorming session conducted in June. So we'll see where we move forward with that over the next couple of years, right? You have something, Sarah, you want to share?
I was just going to say the board members at our last board meeting picked their top 10 from that list, John. And it was really interesting to see the results. Things that the foundation really wasn't interested in funding in the past, they are now, this group of 11 are now interested in, such as, you know, short-term staff positions. If I think on the list was a, you know, a 2-year helper towards, I can't remember, Claudine, but anyway, that's something in the past the foundation would never, ever fund salaries. It's exciting that they're excited about the direction the library's headed.
Great. Appreciate that input. Okay, one last chance. Anyone have any comments around tonight's topic? If not, we'll look forward to being together at 6:30 on the 20th. We will, at this point at least, still plan to do Zoom for that meeting. We might move to the hybrid version if things improve here in Estes Valley as far as COVID testing is concerned. So everyone everyone stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you then. Lynn, Peter, and I are all going to CalCon next Friday. So we'll report back. Thanks all. And Catherine, you can stop the recording now. We're going to adjourn the meeting at 7:15 p.m.
Thanks, John.
Thank you all.
Thanks for listening,
Thanks, everybody.
everybody.
I
Thanks, everybody. Good to see you.